Previously on Transformers University, we followed the Autobots with their adventures in New York. We've gone back to Cybertron, we've gone into space, and now we're going to learn a bit more about the Transformers mythos, as well as head back to New York. We'll meet the girl that loved Powerglide, and we'll take a trip as Hoist goes to Hollywood. All right now, on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the world's longest-running Transforming Toy archive, and of course, all of the social media and YouTube fun accounts that go along with it. Today, we are jumping back, trying to finish off Season 2 of the Generation 1 cartoon. Today, we're going to talk about episodes 36 through 39. Overall, those are episodes 52 through 55, plus one other special thing we'll touch on at the end of the show. I got a lot of great guests lined up for you today, so we are just going to jump right on in with Season 2, episode number 36.
Something like 36?
Lower your voice.
Wait, what is that anyway? Something like 36? Does that include me?
That is overall episode number 52, and that is Auto-Bop, written by David Wise. Now, this episode features Trax and Raoul, who met up earlier in making Trax, and this is a very, very 80s episode. And just like in the 80s, when Frankie Goes to Hollywood decided they were going to up their marketing campaign, all the nice boys love C-Men. So, without further ado, here is Gabriel Owens, the salty C-Man.
Hey folks, Salty Seaman here. Today's episode I'll be looking at is Auto-Bop. Another, we're deep into the groove of Season 2, which I think a lot of people call like kind of the golden era of the original G1 run. The others would disagree, obviously. There's people who prefer Season 1, and definitely a lot of people who prefer Season 3. I mean, it all depends on your taste, but this is definitely what I think set up the really created the mythos of Transformers more than about anything. Is about mid to late season 2, and this episode is well, it's not known as a great episode, but it is a fun episode. This is another David Wise episode, which I'm sure Ant we'll talk about, but also, I don't know if did this episode get, it becomes the question of, did this episode get reused? I don't recall. Ant will definitely know better on this, but short answer is probably. So we start off with a bit of continuity here, as we have a now second time recurring character. And the last time, I believe, he shows up in G1, Raoul, who was previously in Make Trax. Him and Trax will reunite in this episode. We start off with the Raoul and a couple of his buddies in full-on 80s regalia, trying to get into the hottest dance club, Dancitron. They decide, too much. We're just going to go out here and we're going to break dance because it's the 80s, and that's what we do. And you know, we've composed this cold slither music, and boy, by God, Sunbow is going to use it. And this will not be the last time in this episode. The bouncer comes out, a very muscular punk rock guy, because all villains in the 80s had to be punk rockers. It was an easier, a more politically correct thug than anyone of color. So not really mad about that, but the punk rock side of me definitely didn't appreciate the the stereotype in retrospect. So they get ran off, and we get a Michael Jackson reference. Again, this is the 80s, and this may be the most 80s episode of Transformers. So the punks chase them, and we get some more 80s stuff. Something gets called Jive. We get a Prince reference. Just by very lucky happenstance, just after he mentions, I wish I had the real blaster instead of this regular old boombox, Raul's friends do not believe he is an actual friend of the Transformers, obviously. And thus, luckily, that Trax and Blaster just happen to be hanging around the corner. I don't know if they were staking out the club or what, but they jump in to help Raul and his friends, and they start firing on them, which I initially look at it like, wow, that's a bit much. And also the fact that these guys don't run is, of course, an odd thing. One guy attempts to wrap a chain around Blaster's arm, who delivers this line.
You are seriously out of your league, brother.
Which, yeah, what the heck were you thinking? Trax notices a guy in a suit, obviously not your typical gang attire, runs off the bad guys, and now Trax and Blaster join Raul, their old buddy, and his friends to investigate what the heck is going on. We also get name-dropped the name of Raul's friends. Poplock, a breakdancing reference, and Rocksteady, apparently in his pre-Rhino form, so he doesn't quite look like he did in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pilot. But yeah, just interesting how that style of music got named for two characters in 80s cartoons. So Blaster and Trax decide they're going to investigate the inside of the club themselves. We don't see how they enter, because there's no way they could be entering. This is not the only time we've ever seen this problem. In a couple of episodes, we will get to Bot, but I digress. We have just the most 80s dance club you've ever seen. We see everyone's just decked out in the most 80s fashions you can think of. One dude is wearing, it's a shirt that says "Relax," which I'm guessing is a shout out to the famous "Frankie Says Relax" T-shirt from the song from the band Frankie Goes to Hollywood. It was a big fashion piece of clothing back during about this period. And luckily, also, the ceiling is high enough for 20-foot robots to enter and walk around with no apparent problems in a crowded dance club. Some ladies ask Blaster and Trax to dance because everyone, for some bizarre reason, decides they are wearing some kind of really cool outfits, that makes them 20 feet tall and metallic. Blaster's totally down with dancing with this small human. Trax turns down the dance offer. Insert your own Trax joke here. And then gets asked about his clothes, which he says he did not get out of Soho, but off of Cybertron, for which the guy proceeds to ask what the address is. This is very David Wisen-y. Should also mention this episode takes place in New York City, the same as Make Trax, which would make sense that Raul's there. And we also established the Autobots, I believe, do have a mini headquarters in New York for whatever reason. These are the only two episodes I think we ever see that utilized. So certainly something's weird going on. Raul and Poplock and Rocksteady get on the subway. I'd be interested to hear if Ant could coordinate exactly what the geography is and maybe even what train this is. I'm assuming it's just made up New Yorkish, but if it was possible, I'd love to hear it. But the train conductor goes crazy, smashes up the control panel. The train's going out of control. Blaster and Trax come and stop it. And now they're convinced that this has something to do with what was going on at the club, as Trax again points out with his amazing knowledge of culture and fashion. Again, insert your own Trax joke here. Man, and people wonder why Trax got such a reputation in the fandom. That this has to be all connected, and the Decepticons have to be involved, of course. So the investigation must continue. Interesting little bit. Trax and Raul end up fighting a bunch of strange people who don't seem to belong at a construction site, who begin attacking Raul and Trax. Trax says, "We don't have time for these fools. We need to go back to the club." And then he just kind of shoves Raul into his chest compartment, which becomes his passenger seats in his faux Corvette mode. I don't know if we've ever seen the Autobots do that. It also gives me kind of flashbacks to the end of a Clerks animated episode.
Quickly, in here! Who's driving? Oh my god, Bear's driving! How can that be?
So, as suspected, we find out the Decepticons are behind it and are using the music as a mind control device. It's very similar to the G.I. Joe episode, which also uses the same song. Trax discovers, he gets fooled by by Poplock and Rocksteady, who have been taken control over, and he runs into Soundwave and Starscream, who began to turn up the Hypno music ray, and the humans start swarming them. So Blaster and Raul end up in the club, and we get another little interesting bit. Blaster opens up his cassette compartment. Now, at this point, he doesn't have any cassettes of his own, so they find use for this compartment by having the inside of the front case of his cassette compartment be like an analyst board of some sort. I thought that was pretty neat. I don't think we ever saw it before or since. I could be wrong. We also find out in this episode that water can break a hypnotic spell as well as repel scraplets. So yay, water, the most useful substance in the galaxy. So finally this episode gets to what everyone was waiting for, a battle between Soundwave and Blaster. The two boomboxes going at it. Definitely something, as a kid you were hoping for, dreaming for, and this episode gives it. And also gives us some of the best trash talk between Soundwave and Blaster.
I've been waiting a long time for this. You poor excuse for a sound system on dark, no shock.
Also, apparently Trax can see clouds to make it rain. Who cares? We want to see Blaster and Soundwave go at it.
I'd say your nightclub just went out of style.
So Trax and Blaster foil the nefarious Decepticons' ill-defined plan of, I guess they were building a factory for their hypnotized slaves to work in to create energy. I don't know. This episode is so... We have a cameo from Megatron, another non-Prime episode. Very, very few of those, as I believe Ant will probably covered before or after this bit. And then, because they lost their boombox, they since they saved their hides, especially Trax's hide, Blaster agrees to be their Blaster, and they go out to the streets to breakdance and earn enough tips to buy a new Blaster. This episode is so ridiculous, but man, it is so fun. I can't help smiling through the whole thing. Of course, it's the most famous. There's a lot of stuff going on here. There's Trax and Raul. There's the 80s. It's so 80s. We get the big battle between Blaster and Soundwave, which we would not see the likes of again until the Japanese series Headmasters, which we're a long way away from. But yeah, I just had so much fun with this episode. It's not good. It's definitely bad, but it's so bad it's good. I love it. Back over to you, Ant.
And don't forget, you can catch Gabe on his channel, The Salty Seaman, over on YouTube, youtube.com/recharge138. And to touch on a few things that Gabe talked about in his segment, this is one of 4 pre-season 3 episodes to not feature Optimus Prime in any way. We also, for the second time, get to hear Soundwave laugh. And to touch on the subway sequence that Gabe pointed out that I might know a little bit more about, found out a few things. One, there's a couple things I noticed in the animation, and that is the sign, the billboard, I should say, that the train passes says Love's Room. So I'm guessing that's an ad for a sleazy motel. Yeah, LOVSROOM, featuring a whole bunch of hearts on the sign. Make of that what you will. Also, when the train is horribly out of control, people are climbing on the outside of the train, out of the windows, and along the sides of the exterior of the train. And why would you do that? I understand the train is out of control, but why would you want to be outside of the train and moving still? As far as the train number goes, as Gabe mentioned, it is actually a real train. That is the 4 train, which does run above ground from through the Bronx, from Yankee Stadium to the end of its line, which is Woodlawn and at Jerome Avenue. It's not actually the neighborhood of Woodlawn, but it used to be called Woodlawn Avenue, and then was since been changed. But so the Woodlawn Jerome Avenue station is real. And one last thing I noticed in this episode is Trax drops a line that you would normally hear from Stewie Griffin. And one last point within the episode, Raoul looks a bit different than he does in his previous version. His skin tone and his clothing are colored differently, but this version of him... So they actually made a toy of this version of Raoul. It was written up in the toy's bio as a human avatar for Loud Pedal, and Loud Pedal was a Japanese exclusive recolor of Masterpiece Trax, which the Masterpiece Trax figure, as I've mentioned previously, came with a little toy version of Raoul. This one came with the alternate colored version of Raoul as its human avatar. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this episode was written by David Wise, so that means we are wise to the game. And so this script David Wise used on his time on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the 80s, the original series, for an episode called Corporate Raiders from Dimension X, where businessmen are taking meetings at a company called Octopus Inc. And are being hypnotized, and that hypnotism is undone by water.
Well, I guess there's just nothing like a bucket of soapy water to make a dude come clean. Relax.
And that brings us to the next episode. We're going to talk about Season 2, episode number 37.
In a row?
Overall, episode number 53, The Search for Alpha Trion by Beth Bornstein. And I am a big fan of this episode, so I am very happy to talk about this one. I love episodes that go back to Cybertron or talk about the history of Cybertron. We get a lot of those really good ones in the late portion of Season 2, and this is the first of a few that really hit home with me as a kid. And just to remind you about Beth Bornstein, she was previously mentioned on the show as the writer of Child's Play, and this is the second of 3 episodes of the series that she would write. We start out on Cybertron, and we meet a trio of female Autobots, Chromia, Firestar, and Moonracer, and they are breaking into Decepticon HQ. Firestar transforms into a futuristic pickup truck, and they load some Energon cubes onto her, as this is a raid for some energy, but Moonracer accidentally sets off a trap and ends up in a cube prison, and Shockwave finds out, as he is the protector of Decepticon HQ on Cybertron, and he's a bit surprised.
Female Autobots. I thought they were extinct.
That's an interesting line, thinking that they were, quote, extinct. Make of that what you will, but Firestar escapes, and Shockwave fires on Chromia and Moonracer, accidentally freeing Moonracer, and both of those ladies escape as well and transform into their Cybertronian car modes. Shockwave sends a Sentinel to follow, and it's not the Sentinel robots we'll meet later on. It's just a big square. It looks almost like Rosie from the Jetsons, and only if she was flying. And he sends them to follow the female Autobots and find their base. Soundwave then FaceTimes back to Megatron, and Megatron sends a team to Cybertron to help Shockwave capture elita-one. Now, who is elita-one? She is the leader of these female Autobots, and we meet her as the Autobots arrive at their base. But just before they get there, they shoot down the Sentinel, and they know that the Decepticons have been following and may have compromised their position. At Decepticon base, Starscream, Astrotrain, Ramjet, and Rumble, the blue one, arrive to help Shockwave. Now, elita-one contacts Alpha Trion. This is someone new that we're meeting for the first time as well, who is an old, wizened Autobot, and he suggests moving, but warns Elita to not use her, quote, special power. The Decepticons arrive at the position, and Elita is topside for it. She fires on them, and there's a battle ensues. Rumble decides he's going to shake the ground and get the female Autobots out of their base that way, and elita-one attacks and is taken out by Starscream's Null Ray and captured. The other ladies are okay, and we meet two more, a green one and an orange-purple one, and they would get names many years later, but more on that when we wrap up. Megatron decides to FaceTime with Optimus Prime to brag. And it's interesting animation error in this is that during this conversation, a couple of the frames early on one cut to Optimus, he's missing his mouth plate. So he's just eyes and a nose and no plate over his mouth. So he looks kind of like something you would see in the Money for Nothing video by Dire Straits. It's just bizarre looking. But this angers Prime, and he goes straight for the space bridge. We flash back to the launch of the Ark, where elita-one wanted to come along. The Ark, and I know it's not called the Ark in the show, but for the purposes of this podcast, I'm just going to refer to it as the Ark for simplicity's sake. As the Ark is taking off, it's under assault, and there's an explosion right where Elita is, and Optimus believes she was blown up. On his way to the space bridge, the other Autobots realize he left, and they decide to follow. And then we go back to the space bridge, which is unguarded, and Optimus decides to take it to Decepticon HQ on Cybertron, and is quickly captured. It's here we find out that the female Autobots are still trapped below the surface of the planet in their base, and they realize they can blow up the energon cubes they had stolen to escape the rubble, and they do so. The Decepticons realize they have a plan to kill Optimus by dropping him in acid in front of elita-one, and as they're doing this, Rumble cuts the chain, dropping Optimus in. This forces Elita to use her special power. Elita's special power is she is able to freeze time.
Would you like to swing on a star?
And much like Evie Garland, whose father was from the planet Antares Prime, elita-one saves Optimus Prime. But we find out this special power drains her life force, so Optimus and Elita escape to try to find Alpha Trion, with Elita clinging onto life. The Decepticons, meanwhile, believe Prime is dead as the Autobots arrive, and those Autobots are Inferno, Ironhide, and Powerglide, and they attack thinking Optimus is dead as well. The female Autobots arrive to save them, and we get a trio of pairings. We get Ironhide paired with Chromia, Inferno paired with Firestar, and Powerglide paired with Moonracer, and we find out Moonracer has some skills.
I hope you're still the best sharpshooter in the galaxy, Moonracer.
In the universe, Powerglide.
And here the Decepticons are beaten back, and we cut back to Optimus and Elita arriving at Alpha Trion's. Alpha Trion requests Optimus to disengage his, quote, power filter because
Only your design will properly interface with elita-one. But how would you know, Alpha Trion? Only my creator could know that. An educated guess, Prime.
and I would call that a bit of foreshadowing. From there, Optimus and Elita interface.
Please, Elita.
Back at the battle, the Autobots press their attack, and Shockwave transforms and fires, putting the Autobots, both male and female, in a precarious position of falling off the edge of a cliffside, let's call it, but it's mechanical, and it's a bridge, and they're kind of hanging by a thread for the most part, just in time for Prime and elita-one to save the day. The Decepticons retreat, and the female Autobots get a new base. Optimus and Elita say goodbye and talk about Alpha Trion.
I guess we have Alpha Trion to thank for our victory.
Yes, such a wise old Autobot. He's almost like a father to me.
More than you'll ever know, Elita.
From there, the Autobots space bridge to Earth, and we get a bunch of shots of the planet Cybertron as we go to credits. And it's not just me who this episode has had a big impact on. I think a lot of Transformers fans look to this episode as one of the key turning points in Season 2, where it became as much a sci-fi epic, kind of entrenched in some lore and some mythos, as it was a fun kids show. And for a little more on that, I'm going to toss it to Charles, aka Big C, from the Transmissions podcast.
Hi, this is Charles, aka Big C, from the Transmissions podcast. When I was watching the G1 Transformers series as a kid, the episodes that always interested me were the ones where they went back and looked at anything to do with Cybertron and got into the history of what the Transformers, where they came from, what they were doing in the past, and gave more backstory about their origins on their home planet. So the search for Alpha Trion was a really interesting episode that stuck out for me because we got to see what was going on Cybertron separate from what the Autobots are doing on Earth. We got introduced to a whole cast of new Autobots that we hadn't seen before. And of course, the aspect that they were female Autobots was interesting because we hadn't seen any female robots in the Transformers series before then. Of course, the title for the episode is a little bit misleading because I think Optimus Prime searches for Alpha Trion for about 30 seconds in the whole episode. I mean, he finds him pretty quickly without having to really search very hard. But the focus of the episode on elita-one and her team of Autobots, was something that always stuck out for me, and I was disappointed that we never got to see this group of Autobots again. It would have been nice to see these Autobots come back in the movie or in the third season of the show. Of course, because of the way the show was produced, that probably wasn't going to happen. But yeah, I mean, these Autobot characters stuck with me as a kid, and I'm glad they got new life in the IDW comics and in current series. It's also cool 30 years later to have toys of these characters and have them take their rightful place in G1 toy form.
And you catch Charles and the rest of the Transmissions gang on Transmissions podcast, wherever you listen to fine podcasts such as this one. You can find Transmissions on Google Play and Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, and many, many more places. And I think, for me also, one of the things going on right now in 2018, as I record this episode, is the fact that these characters have resonated strongly enough that we're receiving toys of them in mass market. Now, we've seen Chromia a few times earlier, and it's, fun. Some of these characters got toys as part of the Transformers Collectors Club or as part of a convention exclusive from BotCon, but none of the renditions were rather faithful to the animation or to the look. It was more finding colors and molds that kind of fit the character aesthetic and maybe creating a head or two for them. We did receive a Chromia in Generations a few years back, but that was more for the IDW Comics version of her. But in the current line, we have Moonracer and Nova Star, which is the name for Firestar because Marvel owns the name of Firestar. And the other two ladies who we haven't seen yet. Oh, and we also have elita-one in the current toy line. And the other two ladies who got names via the Collectors Club but never received toys were the green female character who was named Greenlight and the orange and purple one who was named Lancer. But I think it's neat. I think it's neat that we're seeing these characters become staples in the mythos going forward. I think that's pretty cool. And speaking of girls, we're going to move on to our next episode, and it's one that's famous and kind of infamous, and that one is Season 2, Episode 38 overall, Episode number 54, The Girl Who Loved Powerglide, written by David Wise, which is much different than The Girl Who Loved Astroglide. That is quite the different piece of media. I'm going to get a younger person's perspective on this. We're going to toss to Eric Crownover of Nerdy Geek Talk and Steel City Bots podcasts for more on the episode.
Hey guys, Eric Crownover here from Steel City Bots over at Nerdy Geek Talk. So, the episode, The Girl Who Loved Powerglide. This episode is, man, it is awesome and weird and very weird. But, you know, even more than usual G1, this one episode in particular stands out for a couple reasons. There's the main ending shot. It's probably the one thing that a lot of people are familiar with the heart. But there's several things that I just find very funny about this episode. So first off, there's the birthday party with Astoria. I think it's funny that nobody wants to be at this birthday party. Astoria does not want to be there. She does not. She makes that very clear. And then all the board members who are there throwing the party for her, they don't want to be there either. So they're all complaining about it. Nobody wants to be there, yet they're all there. And then, you know, the Seekers attack and everything. Powerglide rescues her. All that good stuff. And then he transforms. She has the interaction of like, oh my god, you know, you're a robot and everything. And, man, Powerglide is not exactly what I would call a good boyfriend, because he kind of beats her. He totally hits her, you know, the first time whenever she's like trying to jump up on him, all that stuff. I'm just saying, if you're gonna date a robot, you might want to avoid Powerglide, because he kind of he's pretty rough on her, both, you know, with words, but also physically on occasions. So, yeah, Powerglide's, you know, maybe not your best bet if you're going to pursue a robotic or alien relationship. Just putting that out there. I find it weird how he switches from, you know, just being totally mean to her the entire time, which, you know, it's that thing where it's like, oh yeah, you know, when a kid likes another kid, like, they're mean to him and they tease him, and that's how they, you know, they like him. But Powerglide's really mean to her throughout this episode, and then once she is, you know, once he has her stolen by the Decepticons, then he starts, like, you know, feeling like he really owes it to her, like he has to get her and all that. And then by the end and everything, he does manage to, of course, after you know, riding around on a merry-go-round with her, and yes, Powerglide himself is on the merry-go-round, and then Powerglide himself is also repaired by, he's put into the back of Ratchet. So, you know, a plane, even if it's a small plane, it's still quite impressive. They managed to fit him inside of the back of Ratchet in his ambulance mode. I'm just saying, that is quite, I mean, it's not the biggest, you know, problem in G1 in terms of something being too big to actually fit inside what it's inside, but just have to point it out that, yeah, Ratchet can store a plane in his back, no problem, when he's in an ambulance. It's a really big ambulance, or a really tiny plane. But yeah, by the end, they get to each other. They take the Decepticon, the Sky platform, down, crashing into the Decepticon's base, and they're back safe in the city and everything. He finds out that the necklace that she has is the reason that Megatron wanted to, abduct her and everything. And then first, Powerglide asks if he can call her whenever he's back in the city sometime, which I thought it was funny that he's all shy about asking her for that when, clearly she's been the one to show affection and he has not been so far most of the time. And then she's, just of course, and runs up and kisses him and runs off in a limo and everything. And it's just so funny because then all the Powerglide's just like, shut up. That moment whenever, if your friends see you, a girl kiss you or you kiss a girl or something, and, you just turn around, he's just like, just shut up. Don't say anything. Just stop. Don't. And then, of course, he runs away, and then he opens his chest. We get the infamous picture where his, innards light up to be a heart. So, yeah, you get that iconic picture that basically, summarizes the episode. And, it's cute and everything. It is such a weird one. And because of how really weird, especially if you think about it, a lot of the things that just happened in this episode, it is just very strange and very awesome for that very reason. So, yeah, that's about it. Thanks.
And you can catch Eric and the gang at Nerdy Geek Talk on Steel City Bots and a number of other podcasts on the Nerdy Geek Talk network, on iTunes and Google Play, and wherever you listen to this show, you'll probably be able to find Eric and Company. You can also catch Eric on his own channel on YouTube. Just search out Eric Crownover, Crownover, for some of his videos as well. Now, a couple things worth mentioning, and we're probably going to start backwards here. The heart at the end of the episode is actually one of the weirdest special features to be included in a toy later on. So in 2008, the Transformers Universe line did a Powerglide figure, and there was also later a Walmart exclusive version of this figure, and both of them featured a hatch on his chest that you would lift up to find a heart tampographed onto the plastic underneath. Other things in this episode, Powerglide, who there's so many weird character changes from Powerglide from episode to episode. So like the previous episode, we saw him kind of team up with Moonracer, quote unquote, as his girlfriend, quote unquote. And, he was fairly cordial to her. And here he's kind of abusive to Astoria. But, he learns some lessons about people fast. And it starts with this soundbite.
They must be after some secret plans, or maybe some new fuel they've invented, or maybe they're gonna kidnap all the company's top scientists, or, they're after a girl! And
this will be a little clearer when we get to the end of this episode, this podcast, because there's something else with Powerglide where I think this has had an impact on him as a character, and something a lot of people don't really know about. Now, Powerglide also great at talking himself up, but not so good at receiving praise from others.
Powerglide's the name.
Well, whoever you are, I think you're completely the greatest.
Thanks.
A few other fun things to note in this episode. Ramjet actually gets to live up to his name here and rams Powerglide's wing off. That's what injures him over the desert. And also earlier in this episode, Powerglide has manual controls that Astoria uses and almost crashes him. But, why would his manual controls be able to be overridden so easily? It's confusing to me because, he's like a living thing. And, of course, this episode, another David Wise classic, which means we are wise to the game. Once again, as story editor on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, David Wise used this plot premise pretty closely in an episode called Poor Little Rich Turtle, where the turtles end up in custody of a 15-year-old heiress and CEO to a company. And it's time to do a little side-by-side. So both of them feature a battle that starts on a merry-go-round. First, here's the Transformers version.
Boy, this is better than running that stupid old company any day.
Astoria, we've got to get you out of here. It's dangerous.
What are you talking about? We're on a merry-go-round, for crying out loud.
And here is the poor little rich turtle, Ninja Turtles version.
Oh, wow! This is more fun than I've ever had in my whole life!
Buffy, we can't stay out in the open like this. It's dangerous.
Oh, relax. What could possibly happen on a merry-go-round?
And these both also feature scenes where there is some sort of object used to extract memories from someone. In the Transformers episode, it's called the Psycho Probe. And here's what it sounded like.
Since you won't give me the formula willingly, there are always other ways. The Psycho Probe is capable of extracting all the information from a human's mind.
And a little later on in the same episode, we heard this.
When are you guys gonna feed me? That's what I want to know. Your dumb machine, doesn't even work, and...
Enough!
And in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode, it was called the Brainalyzer. And here's what that sounded like.
Now, young lady, you have two choices. Either you tell me your grandfather's formula willingly, or the Brainalyzer will extract it from your mind.
Go kick a fender, crow brain!
Very well. The Brainalyzer is sensitive to both thoughts and emotions. It will drain the knowledge right out of your head.
Sensitive to emotions, huh? Then you know what I think? I think you're a complete and utter total jerk, man! Yeah, you and all your sleazoid goons! You have, no sense of hospitality whatsoever! You haven't even offered me so much as a cheeseburger since I got here! You're ugly! You're stupid!
And that will be the last we hear from David Wise, at least as far as this episode of the podcast go. And we will move on to Season 2, Episode 39, overall episode number 55, Hoist Goes Hollywood. And that is not Hoist Goes to Hollywood. And this one written by Earl Kress. And for more on this episode, we're going to talk to another member of the Steel City Bots crew. Here is Soundjack.
In short, Hoist Goes Hollywood has Hoist be brought onto a film after he saves some stunt drivers, but is joined by several of his Auto-Bop compatriots who also wanted to be in the film, such as Trax and Powerglide, though they end up being used as merely stunt vehicles until the director revises the plot after obtaining some footage of the Decepticons rescuing Dirge, who crashed in the middle of the set as he was bringing a piece of equipment from Wheeljack's lab from Cybertron. After Megatron hears about the captured footage, he orders the cons back to the studio to destroy the film, and they then chase Spike and Carly around the studio until Hoist drops them into a fake vat of flesh-eating lava, making Megatron think the film is destroyed and causing him to retreat. The director then offers Hoist a starring role after his actions, but Hoist declines, saying him being an Autobot should come first. Do you understand that? Cool. So the big takeaways for that episode for me are, why Hoist? There's several Autobots, like I mentioned, Sunstreaker, Powerglide, Trax, and all Warpath. They're actually all of them. Invite themselves onto the set to work on the film, and all of them make sense in terms of their personality. But I don't know what part of Hoist compelled the writer to write Hoist in as an actor. But hey, Hoist got the acting job, so I guess it worked out all right. The second thing is, I think this is the most abuse Starscream takes in a single episode, besides, single episode. The movie doesn't count in terms of that, because Megatron ends up pulling out a substantial amount of wires from Starscream, and if I recall correctly from the wiki, Starscream doesn't appear for several episodes, so Megatron was finally done with Starscream at this point, it seems. And the last thing, the big thing for the episode is, this is another episode revolving around a plot device made by Wheeljack, but it turns out at the end we learn that the device Wheeljack made actually just does not work like at all. We don't know what it was supposed to do, but it never did work, and Megatron was fighting and trying to keep secret a device that just didn't do anything. So I guess good on you, Megatron, for making Hoist act. I don't know. It's a silly episode, but it is nevertheless a fun episode. It's a good, solid G1 silliness episode, I think.
You know, this is a silly episode, but it's one watching as an adult that feels a lot more fun than I remember it. And I kind of dig this one. There's some other interesting little trivia tidbits in this episode. So, for example, this is the first Transformers appearance for voice actress Susan Blue. She plays the actress Karen Fishhook in this episode, and Susan Blue, a big part of the Transformers voice acting community, not much later on, but later on in something we'll cover soon, and then for many years to come. Also, the movie director in this film, on this film set, cannot get Hoist's name right.
What a stunt! What a robot! What did you say your name was?
They call me Hoist.
What a name! Good job, Moist!
And I kind of dig this movie director just kind of being so into his own work that he can't get his own workers' names correctly. And he even changes the direction of the film.
Why, yes, a great science fiction epic. We'll call it Attack of the Alien Robots. Get those stunt robots back here. I don't care what you have to offer them.
And that direction really makes this episode very meta, in that it is alien robots from outer space in a film, in a show about alien robots from outer space. And the Autobots even get alien masks, which... with the Masterpiece Sunstreaker toy, which you can find my review on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO. It's one of the first videos I did, and I'm very happy with that review. The toy actually came with a version of the crazy alien mask that the Autobots had to wear during their scenes. And the other meta topic in this episode is just how the Autobots are kind of struggling actors trying to get parts, being voiced by professional actors who are always trying to get parts.
And roll camera! I feel like a fool. Do you want to quit? No, but I still feel like a fool. Action!
A couple of last fun facts. The signs in this episode on some of the buildings are a complete mess. So Studio 4 is a closed set, and instead of closed, it says close, CLLOSE. Also, Trax's studio chair, which has all the names on, including Hoist's name correctly, has Trax labeled as trucks. I don't know if that's part of the gag or if that is just some bad animation. And once again, second time in this podcast, and one of 4 times overall, as we mentioned before, an episode without Optimus Prime. And finally, instead of doing a 5th episode this time, there's a couple of reasons behind that. Mainly, the next episode is the first part of a 2-parter, and I didn't want to split them up. But there was something I wanted to do as we got into the final bits of Season 2. And it was something that is only a bonus feature on some of the DVDs, and something that didn't air on television. And so if you're not familiar with the DVDs, if you weren't at one of the conventions where they showed these, if you haven't watched your bonus features, then you're not familiar with these. And I'm going to start this by teeing it up with, remember the G.I. Joe knowing is half the battle PSAs like this one?
I'm running away from home. My parents are mean. Where'll you go? I'm not sure, but I'll show them.
That's right. You'll show them how mean you can be.
Shipwreck!
Isn't it better to try to solve problems instead of running away from them?
I could try talking to my parents again.
Yeah, tell them how you feel. And remember, running away
leads nowhere. Now I know. And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Well, they were also done for Transformers, but never aired, and were straight up, word for word, with the exception of the characters involved, the same scripts. And so instead of shipwreck telling kids to not run away from home, it was Bumblebee.
I'm running away from home. My parents are mean. Where will you go? I'm not sure, but I'll show them.
That's right. You'll show them how mean you can be.
Bumblebee!
Isn't it better to try to solve problems instead of running away from them?
Maybe I could try talking to my parents again.
Yeah, tell them how you feel. And remember, running away
leads nowhere. Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
The Transformers!
Now, there were 5 of these done overall, and the next one is about stealing cars.
Nice car. Should we borrow it? Nah, that's stealing. Come on, I'll ask for permission later.
Looks more like you're asking for trouble now.
Tracks! I figured I wouldn't get caught.
That still wouldn't make it right. Think how you'd feel if someone took your car.
Pretty lousy.
And if you got caught?
You could end up in jail.
Remember, taking something that isn't yours just isn't right.
It's stealing. Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
The Transformers!
You know, Trax should really not necessarily be one to talk here, since he met Raul when Raul was trying to steal him. But I guess, you know, given he was almost stolen 3 times in that episode, Trax knows a thing or two about people stealing cars. Now, for the next one, we get Red Alert and a bunch of kids who really should not be riding their bikes at night.
Slow down! I can hardly see! Look out, a car!
Are you boys okay?
Red Alert, I didn't see ya.
And I couldn't see you. No wonder. You don't have reflectors. They tell drivers where you are.
I see what you mean.
Remember, if you have to ride when it's getting dark, have the right equipment.
And wear bright clothes. Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
The Transformers!
I find this one's funny to watch. If you can dig it up on YouTube, I implore you to do so, because Red Alert pretty much drives these poor kids right off the road. And as a fire chief Lamborghini, you think he would be a little more cognizant of the people on the road. It doesn't really look like he can't see them. It looks like he's maliciously going after them. From there, we'll talk a bit about wearing a life jacket with a little help from Sea Spray.
You gonna wear that sissy thing? It's called a life jacket. Yeah, well, I don't need one. Prepare to come about. Help! Help me!
Gotcha! I guess you know you should have worn a life jacket. Accidents can happen, and a life jacket's good protection.
Like seatbelts in a car or a motorcycle helmet. Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
The Transformers!
And I find the voice acting a little subpar for Sea Spray, like almost like the voice actor was having a hard time finding that voice, because it really does just sound like he has his finger to get the Sea Spray voice, and it's always good to wear a life jacket. Let's just leave it at that. Now, finally, the last one is one I teed up way earlier in the show. And it involves Powerglide.
Stay with me. I'm on you like glue. All right. Hi, guys. Can I skate with you? Nah, you're just a girl. Powerglide.
Aren't you jumping to conclusions? Let her try. You might be surprised.
Okay, but thanks. Wow, look at that. All right.
Remember, don't judge people till you give them a chance.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
The Transformers!
So by the time of this PSA, Powerglide went from being shocked, incredulously shocked that the Decepticons were just kidnapping some girl, to making sure he told a bunch of skateboarders to don't be sexist. So I guess he learned his lesson from that one episode until the PSAs. And that will wrap up another episode of Transformers University. Once again, I am your host, Anthony Bricali. You can find me on the web at www.tfu.info, the world's longest running Transforming Toy archive, and you can catch this show on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, and wherever else you like to listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review. And, of course, swing on by our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO. That's youtube.com/TFU.INFO. And subscribe for all the latest from me, because it's certainly more than just podcasting. As always, if you want to contact the show, the best place to catch me is on Twitter at TFU_info. You can also catch the site on Facebook, Instagram, and on Patreon at patreon.com/TFU.INFO, where you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. And that money will go to help the show and help me keep doing this for you, and get you at least access to this show a full day early. And actually, this episode going up way earlier on Patreon than just 24 hours, because I'm trying to sneak this episode in before my podcast hosting quota resets. So Patreons get cool things like that. Lastly, if you'd like to help out the site in other ways that don't cost you directly, swing on by to tfu.info/Amazon, and anything you order from Amazon, after that, just do your normal shopping as you would. Amazon kicks back a little change towards tfu.info. Once again, I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. I really do appreciate your feedback, so please reach out and drop me a line. Next time on the show, we're going to dig a little further into 1985, into the budding online Transformers fandom, the first Transformers video game, and some of the wacky merchandise that was available in 84 and 85, since I didn't cover it really in 84, around the boom of the original Generation 1 series. Until next time, I am Anthony Bricali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.info. See ya.